HFO is here. It's 5090. It's 5090. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Have we got sound? Have we got pictures? We have. We've also got Riako Music in the house. Good evening, Mel. I hope you're doing well. Got some other viewers in there. Please say hello if you're watching as well. It's Sunday, the 27th of September. It's 5090 show number 13. I can't really leave it on 13, so I'm going to do an after 5090 show next week, but more about that in a bit. It's 5090 show. That's the show about writing 50 songs in the 90 days between July the 4th and October the 1st. And October the 1st is on Thursday. You have 4 days left after today. Array of Emotions, I'm here too. Good. Hello, David. At close of business today, you should have 48 songs under your belt. I'm rounding up. It's actually 47.88, but who writes 0.88 of a song? You'll be able to post songs on the 5090 site, and this gets asked every year. You'll be able to post songs on the 5090 site until it is no longer October the 1st anywhere in the world, which is kind of a cute way of doing it. But that means for me here that I can actually keep posting songs on the 5090 site until noon GMT on October the 2nd. But it's kind of a thing. Array of Emotions says, I feel like writing 0.88 of a song is something you would do. I have actually written half a song, and there are years when, strangely enough, they're called leap years, when February has 29 days. And rather than 14 songs in 28 days, you write 14 and a half songs in 29 days. Makes sense. It's just maths. And the half song is usually a collaboration. So you can do 0.5 of a song. 0.88. There's probably letting the ego flow a bit more than writing just half a song. Riako Music says, yesterday was a family get-together and dear God, we had to cycle in the rain. And then says about 5090, yeah, I'm not that ambitious. Yes, it's been strange weather. It's been glorious here today, but dear me, it's got colder. The temperature outside before I came up here to fire all of this gear up was in single figures, and that's not been a thing during the day for quite a long time, although it's kind of dark out there now. As it's the big finish today, I'm going to be talking about finishing stuff up. So to a certain extent, I'll talk about mastering. And now that's an idea. Good evening, Atitlan. Atitlan says, write a full song, then delete 12% of the notes. Array of Emotions nods sagely and says, Atitlan 66 gets it. Indeed. Or you could have 12% of silence in the middle. No? Yes? No? Okay. I'm going to be talking about finishing stuff up, of the final push, of having something done, and then what do you do with it? And there is an awful lot you can do with it. I mean, you can put it in a box and bury it in a field where nobody will ever find it again. There have been songs that I've written that definitely fall into that category. But there's kind of a lot of other stuff that you can do. And I'll cover some of the things that you might want to think about in the weeks and months that now stretch before us until February album writing month returns on the 1st of February. And I was stuck for a title for this show after next week's 5090's over. What did we learn? Where did we go from here? Sort of show until Atitlan had an absolute brainwave. So from Sunday week, 2 weeks today, this show will no longer be the 5090 show. It will be the Is It Form Yet show. So that means I've got to do a whole new set of title sequences. Yeah, might have to have a think about that. Anyway, before we start on finishing stuff up, Atitlan says, blame me, why don't you? Well, you've got to blame somewhere, and you're in range, mate. Hello to new followers and subscribers this week. Hello to Stephen Levette and French Doge on YouTube who have subscribed to my channel. Thank you very, very, very much. Hello to new followers on Twitch. If you're not already following me on Twitch or YouTube, then please do so, because it helps in the unending struggle against the strange, arcane and unknowable mysteries of viewer attractiveness algorithms that both Twitch and YouTube use to plonk your stuff in front of viewers. And I'm still a long way off my goal of 50 followers by the end of the year. So if you know anybody you can conscript into following me who's into music or just general wittering and random odd diversions and trains of thought, then bring them along. The more the merrier. That's the housekeeping out of the way. Big finish. I'm talking about finishing off your song so it sounds as good as it possibly can, first of all. What are you going to do to your song? You've finished it. You remember we were talking about editing, so I hope you've done all the editing already. You've got rid of the count-in at the beginning. You've got rid of any clonks and mechanical noise from your microphones. You know, if you hit the microphone stand with your guitar before you started, I hope that's all been removed. So you've ended up with a nice track, and it sounds pretty good. Could it be a bit better? We've vaguely touched on mastering in previous episodes, and I'm not going to go over it in detail now, but what I will do is I will switch to this track, What I Done Wrote, this afternoon. And what I'm going to do is first of all, I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to now save it as a demo, because I want to show you a few tricks and things that you can do which will make your mix sound a bit better. So I've got ozone and tonal balance control there. I'm going to get rid of them. There's a lot of processing on the individual tracks, and we've covered mixing. I'm not going to cover mixing again. But what I am going to do is now say, okay, this is your final mix. And what is it? There's drums. There's a Spitfire audio, lovely little tool called I think it's the Oliver Patrice Weber toolkit, OPW toolkit, is it? Yes, Oliver Patrice Vader. So this is one of these 29 quid jobs from Spitfire Audio. Well worth getting, because there's bucket loads of stuff in this. You get Oliver's piano, both treated and all sorts of other stuff. And you get a flugelhorn in various stages of treatments. You get some pads in various stages of treatments. Tempo synced electronics. One-shots that include a Wurlitzer electric piano and a whole bunch of swells and percussion. So you get castanets and hand claps and percussion hits recorded in a favela in Southern America or South America on Oliver's travels. So there's a whole ton of stuff for 29 quid. So I dived in and I plumped for that. And it's all very quiet, very mannered, and it's not particularly shouty. And I found myself responding to that. Maybe it's the turn of the season. Maybe it's the evenings drawing in. Maybe that's the fact that I've got the winter duvet on and I'm now feeling like I ought to be hibernating. But dialed down my guitar playing tremendously on this track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a bit of it with nothing whatsoever on the master track. And then I'm going to show you how I have to give a shout out for Bobby Ozinski, because he was the one who showed me this trick that has meant me getting far better mixes than I have done in the past. Good evening, Juha. Janu Arias is in the house. Hello, Governor, he says. Hello to you too, sir. This is nice. I'm glad you're all dropping by. It's rather nice having lots of chat and making this more interactive, because that's kind of the point of me doing this. So please shout out if you've got questions in the chat or you want me to go into stuff in more detail. But what am I doing? What I've ended up doing is using a lot of compressors on individual tracks, more than I used to. This one is the hybrid compressor that you get with Waves. I think it was like $29 in their sale. I find I'm using this one, and I've got a few other compressors, but I really like this one. I don't know, maybe it just suits my sort of music, but I've dropped that on the drums. And the reason I've dropped that on the drums is because if I go over to the master and go to the plugins, what you need is get yourself a view meter plugin. So I've got one here, stereo view meter here from Waves again. And I'm going to just drop that on the master track. Oh, congratulations to Yano Arias, who has just finished song number 50. Bravo. It's always satisfying. I know how satisfying it is when you've done that. So well done, mate. You've been really busy this afternoon. I've only commented on, I think, one of the tracks, and it was like, I went back to it and saw it was a zong, which means that it had 0 comments. I thought, I just commented on that. And then I realised there were 3 more of however many more of yours immediately below it. I was like, oh. And they do not sound rushed jobs either. So, folks, if you're on the 5090 site, go and check Yano Arias' stuff out. Right, back to what I'm doing and what am I blathering on about here. I'm talking about having a track. You think it's done. You think your mix is kind of balanced. One way of checking it out is to drop this view meter on the master bus. And the reason it's a view meter is, as Mr. Osinski explained when he taught it to me in the class that I did, they respond rather differently to digital view meters with LEDs because the needle has ballistics on it, and Waves actually simulate the physical ballistics of the needles responding, and that gives you a different reading than just a computer flashy lights LED type display. So what he tells you to do is, for the drums, say, you want them to be kind of in the -7 to -5 range. Okay? And because I've already mixed this, they kind of already are. Same with the synths. All right, there's a few wobbly peaks, but I'm living with that. They're mainly in the 7.5 range. So the guitars, I turned up a bit because they were fighting everything else. But you can see they're still in between -7 and -5 for most of the time. And the vocals don't want that autumn chill, as you can see, are also in the -7 to -5 range. And what that does is it gives you a ballpark for levels. Now, the levels, when I unsolo everything and start again from the beginning, are going to be a lot louder. But the weird thing is, it already sounds like a coherent mix. You have to tweak it, and I tweaked mine because I wanted the synths a bit louder and the guitar a bit louder. But just using the levels on the individual tracks, listening to it with a pair of view meters on the master track, got me, and has got me here, a pretty decent first mix. You could upload this now to 5090 and people would go, yeah, that's a cool mix. I tend to use mastering as a way of just giving what I've done a little bit more sparkle. And I know you should never master your own stuff is the way things go, because your ears are used to the way the song sounds. So because you've got used to it, you can't hear stuff that to a fresh pair of ears would stand out as a glaring error. Plus, I mean, I've got monitors, yes, but they're budget KRK Rocket 5s, so they're only that size. Your average mastering engineer is going to have A, much better hearing than I've got, and B, much, much better speakers in an acoustically treated room rather than sitting underneath a bed. So he's going to get or she is going to get a much, much better idea of not only how your song sounds, but also how it should sound. Januaris asks, wouldn't you say that you could take a break for a week and then do the mastering with fresh air? Absolutely. And I've done that. When I released the last album, I tweaked it, did as much as I could to make all the tracks on the album sound coherent and about the same level, and burnt it to a CD and then left it for a week and then came back to it. And it's quite interesting how that allowed me to pick up stuff that I'd just heard and it hadn't registered. So yeah, absolutely recommend that as a way of, I mean, 5090, we're in a rush. The idea is you get it out the door, but if you come back to something because it's good enough for you to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to push this further and polish it, take your time. And as January says, come back to it with fresh ears. Take a break, take a step back from it and then come back to it. What have we got here? I want to make my song sound better. There are a whole bunch of things you can do. One of the simplest is, and let's do it, is just to chuck a maximizer on it, on the master track. And all that does is it will boost the volume of your song to a specific target. So for instance, so you've got a threshold when it kicks in and an out ceiling. So here it'll basically just bump against the 0 dB meter, and I tend to have mine set at minus 0.3 dB. So if I now play the track, so let's put that back to 0 and enable it. And now I'm going to wind it up. The light outside is growing weaker. My spirits darling need a boost. So as you can see, that got us up to a target of 14.4, minus 14.4 loudness unit full scale, which is kind of around about what the industry likes, allegedly. Although everybody's different and people wind it up over and over and over again. January says, yes, I love maximizers. And the more one knob the maximizer is, the more I like it. Ha ha ha. Yeah, the Waves one's pretty good. This one is their cheapest maximizer, and I kind of like it. So that's one thing you can do. But word of caution, and this is something I mentioned weeks ago, goes back to the Fletcher-Munson curves and loudness curves, because in making the track louder, I'm altering how the mix is perceived, and it may mess up my mix. So I may have to change the mix to compensate for the fact that I've bunged a maximizer on it and it's suddenly leapt in volume by nearly 5 dB. What you can do if you've got isotope is you can get very clever with it and use Ozone, which is Isotope's mastering plugin. And what Isotope's Ozone does is it has frequency curves and loudness curves for thousands of songs, and it listens to your song and goes, yeah, that's kind of like this, and that works best with this EQ curve and this amount of compression and this amount of maximizer. And you literally pick the loudest part of your song. So I'm going to do it here. I'd rather hibernate this winter. Feels like it bears somebody ill. Don't want that autumn chill. So lots of questions in the chat, so I'll cover those in a second. So did you hear it when it dropped the isotope maximizer on? It suddenly jumped in volume again. The target threshold for Ozone is minus 14.0 LUFS, and it's dropped an equalizer, a bit of dynamic equalization on it, or dynamic compression, multiband compression, dynamic equalization, and a maximizer on it to perk up the sound. So if I just pick a random section of it and bypass Ozone, just hear the difference in what it's done to the mix. So that's without. I'd rather hibernate this winter. Feels like it bears a body ill. Don't want that autumn chill. So there's kind of quite a big difference there, although you can see it's momentarily hit minus 14, but it's sticking around minus 18.3. So what I can do, that's just Ozone's initial first guess. I can now push the maximizer so I make it louder by just dropping the threshold. I'd rather hibernate this winter. Feels like it bears a body ill. Don't want that autumn chill. And again, you can hear the mix changes as a result of the loudness, and things come through, and some things maybe take a step backwards. So let's catch up on the chat. Yanoera says, I've noticed many times in a dense mix that when I plug a maximizer in, the drums almost disappear. And what does a I mean, the maximizer is a kind of compression, I'm guessing. So I don't honestly know. I'm imagining it's a sort of compressor / limiter, because the idea is you're telling it that your absolute limit, in my case here, is minus 0.3. Compression, especially on drums, is going to really change the characteristics of your drums. Ryoko Music says, do you ever get caught in a weird mixing mastering cycle where you keep going back and forth until you lose your mind? Oh God, yes. And tweaking something and thinking, oh, that's unbalanced the mix. So you go back and balance the mix, and then that buries something else, and you think, okay, maybe now's the time to step back, because I've learnt that, at least for me, that's a sign that I have tired ears and that I should stop, because I'm only going to make things worse. Once you recognize you're in that death spiral, then bail out. Please bail out. Come back to it when your ears are not as tired, because you'll just waste time. You really will. Atitlan says, Ozone is one of the best plugins to get a hold of. The good thing is that it is always going as on sale. Yeah, there's usually a bundle that Isotope are offering at the moment. And it is worth, don't buy it full whack. Just wait until they have a decent bundle going on and then splurge. That's what I did. And then the next time they had a decent bundle, I was so impressed with the standard version, I splurged on the advanced version. So yeah, well worth getting. And even after learning how to do mastering with individual plugins, I still go back to Ozone because it's better at it than I am. It's as simple as that. So Ryako Music says, yes, not the only one. Atitlan says, often after maximizing, something jumps out of the mix and needs to be dialed back. Oh God, yes, absolutely. There is another Isotope tool, which I've shown you before, but which I'm going to show you again, which is called Tonal Balance Control. And what this does is, again, it profiles the EQ curve of what you're listening to, and you can pick genres like electronic dance music or country or hip hop, or in my case, I'm going to just use rock. And what Tonal Balance Control does, again, is it has profiles of thousands of pieces of music that it listened to and memorized, and now it compares those profiles with what you're doing with this frequency curve. Let me get rid of me, because that gives you more of an idea. I'm running out of screen estate here. So we'll pop Tonal Balance Control up there. We'll have Insight down here. And again, if I just pick a part of the song, I'd rather hibernate this winter. Feels like it bears a body ill. Don't want that autumn chill. Ashislan says, is it a multi-band compressor? It's kind of a fancy oscilloscope. So it's not actually doing anything to the signal. It is literally showing you what the signal is doing. And now that I've stopped playing the music, all the levels are dropping down, apart from where my voice is, I'm guessing. This crest factor is whether you want it to be in the middle. So it's about how compressed the low frequencies are. Are you over squashing it, or are you not squashing it enough? You want it somewhere in the middle. So for a rock track, I've done fairly good, or Ozone with its initial mix has done pretty well. This is the broad display, so it splits everything into 4 frequency bands. These are the target areas. The little blue areas are the targets you want to be in, and the white lines are where your track is doing, averaged over, I think I've got this set at 10 seconds. So it listens to, or it gives you a display of the last 10 seconds of your track and says, this is where the sound profile is. And if you want to get really retentive about it, you can do it with a fine curve, which is much, much more detailed. And again, this changes. So that's an orchestral curve. That's an R&B soul curve. That's the curve from Thinking About You. So I've got profiles from individual singles, which you can download from iZotope's site. This is the profile that iZotope thinks you ought to be following for posting stuff on TikTok. So you're fairly constrained, but that's the signal compression on the audio that TikTok uses. So you kind of want to follow that if you're posting stuff on TikTok. What else have we got? PYT. Most defs do it now. You know, if you really want to shamelessly copy the EQ profile of a song, you can do it. But if I switch this back to rock and again play just a random bit. I'd rather hibernate this winter. Feels like it bears a body ill. Don't want that autumn chill. So that's not too shabby, is it? I mean, I'm slightly hot at the high end, but I'm going to just claim that I just like a bit more presence in my tracks than maybe most rock tracks do. And maybe that's because I've still got some high frequency hearing left. Rock mixers maybe don't so much. That's kind of a way of sweetening your song, making it conform. Why would you make it conform? Well, you kind of want your stuff to fit in with everybody else's stuff, because that way it's going to fit in when it's played on the radio, rather than making people going, "Ooh, what's wrong with that track? It doesn't sound like everything else." Because there are ways of not sounding like anything else that are good. But as far as mastering goes, not sounding like everything else is not one of the good things. January says, yeah, so people will listen to the song and not the mix. Exactly. You don't want the mix to get in the way. So again, that's why you listen to stuff. And if you haven't got ozone or neutron or tonal balance control or even a maximizer, don't sweat it. There are ways in which you can get your track sounding more like anything else. And it is very simple. Is before you mix and while you're mixing, have a CD of a track that you really like and listen to that, and listen where the frequency ranges are and where the track is loud. And again, I'm afraid this comes back to developing your ears, of listening to something and go, oh yeah, that's a bit boxy, or oh, that's really nasal, or there's too much thump. Of knowing, you remember the track I did about the frequency, what's the frequency, Kenneth, and all that. You need to learn what frequency ranges cause boxiness and what frequency ranges cause nasalness, and what causes hissy, tinny sounds to your drums. And frankly, I don't think you can do that online. I know there are online, massively open online courses and I've taken part in a few. And quite frankly, if you're playing somebody a listening exercise on a YouTube video, they are not going to hear what you're telling them to listen for, because YouTube's not going to leave your audio uncompressed. So, and this again comes back to a guy called Stefan Bettke, who's a German composer, DJ, and general genius called Pole. And I went to a lecture that he gave on mixing and mastering many years ago at the Mute Records event. And somebody said, how do I make my ears work properly? How do I train my ears? And he was brutal. He just said, get rid of your MP3s. Because compressed audio is going to do stuff to the signal and it's going to rob it of the stuff that you really need to hear to make your song sound best. And working with WAV files is the optimal way of doing it. If you've got audio files that are even higher frequency than, or a higher sampling rate than WAV files, use those as well. I've got some, I actually have a 96K 24-bit release of a Rush album because I'm a sad git, but it sounds amazing. Ryako Music says, I'm glad he was straightforward about it. Don't just leave your song with a final mix and leave out the mastering stage. There are ways, and there are sites online that you literally send the site a WAV file and they'll master it for you for like a couple of dollars, $4. What the thing will be doing is something akin to what Ozone's doing, in that it's comparing your track with a lot of other tracks and altering things until it fits. A mastering engineer will be more sympathetic and will probably be able to bring out the nuances of your song more than an algorithm was. If you upload your stuff to SoundCloud now, it has a button that says, please master this, that does the same sort of thing on SoundCloud. And at least with SoundCloud, I suppose these days, if you upload a WAV file, you do get the opportunity for people to listen to that in higher definition than just an MP3 file. Yano Aries says, I think the SoundCloud just uses isotope. It wouldn't surprise me. Every now and again, I go back to SoundCloud and post something on it just to see if they fixed their spammer problem yet. They haven't, and they clearly can't be asked to do anything about it. And and Array of Emotion says, and then to get spammed in 2 minutes. I said something to that effect on the 5090 site, and Tim Fatchin said, 2 minutes? Good Lord, it takes them seconds here. It's irritating. It really is. But such is the way of the world. You just sigh and move over to somewhere like Bandcamp, where, thankfully, touch wood, nobody has figured out really how to spam them yet. And the other thing is that Bandcamp, you get money for selling your stuff on as well. So Bandcamp's the sensible choice. That's where the cool kids go, folks. Ashitlan says they obviously use bots to monitor new uploads. Not only do they use bots to monitor new uploads on SoundCloud, they also use bots to monitor people saying that they've just uploaded something to SoundCloud on Twitter and spam you on Twitter as well. Lovely. But I found this month that, and I've been listening and commenting to a lot of people who have used SoundCloud to host their material for 5090 this year. I found out that if those people have spam comments on their songs, I can block and report the spammer from my account. So I've been enthusiastically doing that as much as possible. Ryako Music says, oh, how annoying. Yeah. January says, I like the player on SoundCloud a lot more than Bandcamp. If the site was policed properly, it would be a market killer because the interface is great. I love the protocol and the way that comments can actually be synchronized to playback, so they actually appear at the relevant part of the song. That's a brilliant way of doing things. But until SoundCloud fix this endemic sewage farm of, buy more followers, buy listens, then they ain't getting any money from me, and it'll be another 6 months before I go back there now. Ryako Music says, I get spam on Instagram. I get all sorts of strange things on Instagram, but let's not go there. So by now you're going, oh yeah, well, what does the actual track sound like, Chris? Or at least I hope you're saying, well, yeah, but what does the actual track sound like? So I'll save the changes to the demo because it's always worth having a comparison. So we'll go back to my final tweaked, mastered, polished, everything else version, and I'll listen through to this, and I won't play you a reference track, but if I was going to pick a reference track for this, it would probably be something smooth jazz, something maybe I'm a bit in me Steely Dan mode with this one, but see what you think anyway. This is called That Autumn Chill. And I'll switch to the screen so you can watch it, and I'll pull up all the various bits of relevant information. January says, polka! I haven't done a polka this year. I need to do that. I need to take several leaves out of Weird Al Yankovic's book. Here we go. So that was That Autumn Chill, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you like it. So Yanuera says, the mix has a lot of great elements, like the drums sound really crisp and the guitars with the synth play together in a very pleasant manner. That's high praise coming from you, sir. I have started not just putting, well, it's Ableton's drum bus effect, and I've started using one set of presets in it called Drum Sharpener, which don't do an awful lot, but they really emphasize the transients, and then dropped an instance of that hybrid compressor on it. Mel's going into raptures over DXZ, which is the Yamaha DX7 free emulation that Brian Eno has even started using. It's so faithful to the DX7 that it will actually load DX7 ROM banks, and the TRW patch that comes with DXZ that sounds as close as I can get to an Ondes Martenot is particularly beautiful. So if I just solo it. It is rather lovely. You'll notice as well, though, I have got the new favourite, Oral River, on the A-Send. And I've dropped quite a lot of the synths into the A-Send to give a bit of space on that. Atitlan says that patch has almost become a trademark this year. It will continue to be so, I think. I just love it. I have always loved the vibe of the Ondes Martenot because it's evocative of children's TV that I used to watch when I was a kid, because Jerry Anderson, Thunderbirds, Stingray, Captain Scarlet, UFO, they were all heavily scored by an absolute genius called Barry Gray, who I talk about frequently. I haven't done for a few weeks, but I talk about this guy frequently on the show. Do check out Barry Gray's work, because the guy was genius. Heavily influenced, I have to say, by the work of Wally Stott, who, you remember the Travelogue London LP that I got recently? Wally Stott did a lot of incidental music for the Goon Show, and having got a radio in the bedroom that picks up internet radio stations, there is an internet radio station called Abacus Goon Show, and all it broadcasts 24/7 are episodes of the Goon Show, which was a BBC comedy show which starred Spike Milligan and Harry Seacombe and Peter Sellers. And it's the precursor to everything from Monty Python onwards. It's all down to the mad comedic genius of Spike Milligan, and the incidental music is an absolute joy to listen to because it's fully orchestrated. And if you then go and listen to the Jerry Anderson Captain Scarlet, the Mr. On's theme, that's where Portishead got the idea from, and the vibe on that is very much a Barry Gray vibe. But I'm getting profoundly sidetracked and squirreled, but then, that's what this show's about, really. So that was That Autumn Chill. I think we'll consider mastering done, shall we? So let's move on from mastering. We've mastered it. Before that, we've got the song structure right. We've edited all the rubbish out of it. We've got rid of the count-ins. We've got rid of the bangs and crackles and the cat being sick and everything else. and you've just mastered it. So we've now got a lovely, lovely polished track. What happens next? What are you going to do with it? And seriously, that is a question that you need to ask yourself. What are you going to do with that track? Is that it? Is that done? Or are you, so when 5090 refreshes next year and the file server gets reset, is your masterpiece going to just disappear off the internet? Is that going to be it? Januarius says archive. Absolutely archive it. Burn your WAV files to CDs. Most do new PCs still have CD burners on them, or is it all USB sticks? Whatever. Find your storage method of choice and store the stuff somewhere other than on your computer. Even better, store it online so other people can listen to it. To which point we come on to the next big thing to do with your music is try and make money out of it. For sure, you can put it on SoundCloud if you like and get spammed, but chuck it on something like Bandcamp, then people can actually buy your stuff. And surprise, surprise, they do. Not in great quantities, or at least not for me, because nobody's heard of me. But I do sell stuff on Bandcamp. And put it like this, if you don't put it on Bandcamp, you definitely aren't going to sell it. But if you put it on Bandcamp, you start to build up a portfolio that is going to survive month on month, at least as long as any cloud storage is likely to survive. And other music streaming retail platforms are available. I mean, I was listening to stuff this afternoon. Somebody had posted on 5090 and was using a site that I'd never heard of called Alone Tone to host their stuff. Several people this week have told me that I need to put my instrumental stuff on Song Trader because that is where people can buy stuff for sync licensing, which is effectively to use them on television and film and video games. And Song Trader. Januarius is going to know a lot more about this because he does game design and game music. So Atitlan66 says, which is a shame, as it means fashion has outweighed quality at both ends of the spectrum. Januarius says, and replying to Januarius's comment that vinyl sales beat CD sales this month for the first time since the 1980s. Didn't we talk about it here? What's the most permanent storage for music? We have to figure this out. Many years ago, I wrote a draft science fiction short story about a cadre of astronaut monks who had taken it upon themselves to preserve the world's media in digital form by engraving it bit by bit on the internal surfaces of hollowed out asteroids. Go figure. That was just an idea I had. You need something that is not going to degrade rapidly over time. I've got CDs that I bought in the 80s that are suffering from bit rot. They go this lovely gold colour, but then start skipping or repeating. And it's because January says, all music, even Kanye? Ryako Music says, oh God, that's tedious. Well, yeah. But yeah, as January says, take a page from NASA's playbook and shoot it into space. But yeah, where was I going with this? Even the stuff I wrote when I was 14 says January. Yeah, well, you may want, that might need to go into the put it in a box and bury it in the garden category. Your call. But Oh yeah, CDs. I'm now on my third copy of the original Koyaanisqatsi soundtrack album because the first CDs just went, ew, really nasty. So CDs, despite being touted as a long-term, enduring storage medium, kind of aren't. And back in the 80s, it was like, well, yeah, I'm just going to save stuff on floppy disk because I'll always be able to read something on floppy disk. When was the last time you saw a new computer with a floppy disk drive on it? When was the last time you saw a floppy disk drive, an external floppy disk drive, on sale anywhere? I don't even know if the latest version of Windows 10 has drivers that support floppy disk drives. Knowing Microsoft, it would very much surprise me if it did. Ryako Music says floppy disks, oh dear. Array of Emotion says, write your music out on some scrolls and put them in a cave near the Dead Sea. Now that will work. Papyrus scrolls do have quite a long shelf life. Of course, there are some strange discrepancies. So she's now retired, bless her, but there was a lovely Radio 4 continuity announcer called Charlotte Green. And Charlotte Green used to do a lot of continuity announcing for Radio 4 and would read the shipping forecast and would introduce programs between programs. And go online and search on YouTube or wherever else you can find audio files. Just search for Charlotte Green Gets the Giggles. Because on the Today program about 10, 15 years ago, she disintegrated into fits of giggling, and it was all the result of some audio recordings that had, and I kid you not, been made by scratching a gramophone record onto a sheet of paper covered in carbon black. And this sheet of paper was known to be an audio recording, but nobody could figure out how to play it back until about 10 or so years ago, when they scanned it in and then analysed the scratches on the paper in sufficient detail to recreate a fairly decent stab at what the noise would have sounded like when it was recorded sometime in the middle of the 19th century. So this was a really, really old recording. And I guess the person recording was told to sing falsetto, because that way, with the higher frequencies, they got more of a response from the recording. But the resulting recording, quite frankly, A, is awful, and B, sounds ridiculous. And bless her, Charlotte Church sums up the story nicely, says what a cool idea it was and everything else, and gets about 15 seconds into the next news item, and the ludicrousness of the sound that she's just heard finally hits the part of her brain that's processing what she's supposed to be saying next, and she completely loses it, and it's lovely. So Charlotte Green, Getting the Giggles, do check it out. That was a fantastic squirrel, and thank you, Array of Emotions, for tipping me down that particular rabbit hole. Yanuaris says, awful and ridiculous. It's like reviews of my album. Yeah, that's unfair. Your stuff is pretty cool. It just needs to get in front of ears, which is kind of, see how I'm doing this, returning back to the point. Get your stuff in front of people's ears. Get it listened to. Don't just bury it. Perform it. Now, that's something that I've done, and Ryako Music was there when I did it, and that was 5 years ago, and quite frankly, the sort of setup I've got in here, I'd need to clone myself if I could make before I could make a decent stab at recreating live what I'm doing in here. The way I do it on January says I performed a song with Formstock, and that reminds me, so did I. And I assume it went well. Nobody complained. Yeah, they did with me. They said, we can only hear your voice. And it's like, oh, God. So I had to do it again with the backing plugged in this time. So hideously embarrassing. Don't think I'm going to be doing that again for a while. But I've got some friends who do live stream events, and if anybody's following me on Instagram, you'll have seen my photograph last night of me sitting on the sofa with a nice glass of Côte de Rhône watching somebody else live stream for a change, and that was Peter Waring. So hello to Peter if you stumble across this on YouTube. I really enjoyed last night's show. So it was like 30-minute sets from 4 of the guys from Lockdown live streamers, and I did a 30-minute set a few events ago, and basically just played guitar and synths along to Ableton, which was doing all the donkey work. So at least some of it was going to sound okay. So I'm now being laughed at in the chat, but never mind. So yeah, perform your stuff, sell your stuff. And that leads me on to the next thing that you need to do with your stuff. And that is metadata. Why should you bother with metadata? Well, if somebody stumbles across a file of your music on the web, they may, not guaranteeing it, but they may go, oh, this is rather good. I wonder who did this. So, for instance, if I have a look at the file properties for Mel and my track Björk and Kirk in Outer Space, there are details. And if I scroll down, it says contributing artists Ryako and Chris Harris, album 5090, genre crossover. So there is information there on who did it and why that you need to embed in your material so people can find you if they like your stuff and find out more. And you don't need to spend money. You don't need to have a plugin. Audacity has a fairly competent metadata editor in it. I've also got one here called MP3 tag that I've used. No, we won't download that at the moment. So what MP3 tag does, if I go back to, in fact, we can probably do it this way. Well, let's just, so this is, it's still set to my album on Eric Tulpa's. And if I select one of the MP3 files, you can see I've not only embedded the title, the artist, the album name, it's also got the album cover embedded in it. So MP3 tag is worth doing. You can do bulk edits is one of the reasons that I use MP3 tag. So you can do all your tracks at the same time and then go to the individual tracks and add the names to them. It's worth doing. And reading various music publication / sales / licensing websites, the MP3, not the MP3 side, the metadata side of administering your music is something that everybody needs to be doing. Because if you neglect it, you're neglecting a possible avenue for people to come and listen to your music. Please add metadata to your stuff. January's comments on the crossover. I always go to the crossover section of the record store. There are some absolute gems on there. And with MP3 tag, you can also copy titles directly from file names. Brilliant. So metadata your work, tag your work, let people find you. Don't make it hard for people to find you. So that's kind of where I've got to with this. So we're what, an hour and 10 minutes. That's not too long. January says, "You'll never find me." Yeah, that's don't kill your own darlings, to completely contradict a well-known writing cliche. Don't knock your stuff, and I'd say that to anybody who's got stuff out there now that they finished. When you play it to people, don't say, "Oh, it's not very good," because that's kind of setting their expectations. And one of the things that I've learnt in my day job as an educational psychologist / training designer is how a cognitive trap that we can fall into called anchoring can really alter your perception of stuff. And if you're setting the expectations really low for your material, people's judgment of that material will be dragged lower. So don't do it. Don't do it, kids. Don't knock your own stuff. I was going to say let other people do it, but you don't want to listen to the negative feedback unless it's constructive. And by definition, I don't think constructive feedback can be negative. January says, also, people will feel belittled if they like something and you tell them that it's not good. Yeah, exactly. They feel like they don't appreciate their compliments and feel they're stupid for enjoying it. And that's the whole thing that drives what has become known as guilty pleasures. Ryako Music says, let other folks make you feel shitty. Yeah, exactly. Don't do it. I moderate my comments on YouTube, and okay, I've actually, to be honest, not had any really profoundly negative comments. I had a lot of spam, quite a lot of spam over the last week. Spammers, if you're watching this, I moderate my comments. If they're at all dodgy, they are held in a queue for me to approve, and not only do I not approve them, I report you for spam as well. So save yourself some grief. Go somewhere else, please. January says, Ryako, yes, but also I do anything to get a laugh. Anything. I'd sell my music for a laugh. I'd sell my family. Yeah, might want to rethink that, mate. But each to their own. You know, and to be honest, a lot of your stuff is really funny, and I'm sure there is a humour market out there, so go for it. Wobby123 says, hello, sorry I'm late. That's all right, Wobby. I'm kind of at the, yeah, that's all me notes stage at the moment. So I don't know about you. I don't feel like stopping just yet. So let's just hang out and have a chat. So January says, welcome to the after party. We'll have a proper full-on after party next week. And I have a number of non-50/90 things to work on next week, one of which I now have all the components for my costume. Belinda, good evening. Noirshire is here as well. I've quietly been amassing a bunch of components for a very silly thing for Halloween. Thanks to, I think it was Mel's suggestion on this very site. And I kid you not, I'm really giggling at what it's going to turn out like, because some of the bits I got have turned out to be very good indeed. So I will start working on that after the 1st of October. And later on, probably on the Thursday before Halloween, I will debut the results of my handiwork, and I will probably be doing the November the 1st show to that sort of thing. Atitlan, good night to you. Thank you very much for swinging by and sticking around, and thanks for your contributions as ever. You're always a creative spark and very welcome. So good night to you. Yeah, so after party next Sunday. I'm kind of thinking, what do we do on an after party? Apart from be very noisy and get complaints from the neighbours and drink heavily and stuff like that. It will be, I hope, a celebration and a retrospective. And I hope it will be a chance to review progress of where we were 90 days ago and where we are now. January says, Chris, you mentioned that you had felt a bit down this summer. Any luck with jolly songs? I kind of, yeah, I had a couple of fairly half decent jolly songs. Trying to remember what it's called because I can't remember. A couple, he says, and then goes, I can't remember what it's called. I did love Björk and Kirk in Outer Space, and Keeping It Unreal was the other one. That was actually written after Mel said, enough with the bleak, do something dancey and upbeat. So that was kind of happy and upbeat. At the moment, I'm just tired more than anything else. I am sleeping, but is it quality? Nearly said Quality Street. I've got chocolate on the brain. It's not really quality sleep, according to my sleep tracker, and I need to get more exercise because I've just been sitting in this chair for the last 3 months and really, really not done enough exercise. Reacco Music says, God, you make me sound so pushy and bossy. Lol. No, it's not intended in that. It is, I think we're well aware of each other's tone of voice in the way that we report how each other speak. And I mean, the folks here have seen your streams. They know what you're like, and I know what you're like, and you know what I'm like. And so, yeah, no criticism intended at all. January says, about progress, I mentioned on Slack, it's the little things. Doing a smooth modulation from C major to F major in the middle of the song. It just warms my heart because I've tried to push for that sort of progress, and it's finally paying off a little bit. Yeah, and it can be the craziest things that suddenly engender that wonderful sense of triumph of suddenly listening back to something and realizing, well, couldn't have done that 6 months ago. And a lot of the tracks that I'm doing now, and even that mix tonight, that mix has a tightness to it. That little -5 to -7 dB routine of going through each track and seeing how it sits on the master track with a view meter has made such a difference to the starting point of my mixes. And that starting point is already better than the finishing point of a lot of the mixes that I did, even in form. Noashai says, sitting in this chair, the title of my biography. Januaris replies with, the title of my biography, so many plugins. Oh, God. I think it was Candle this afternoon had posted some deliciously noisy, weird stuff with a free VST synth plugin that he was raving about. And I went and had a look online to see if I could get a copy of it. And sadly, it's only 32-bit. and Ableton Live 10 only uses 64-bit plugins unless you use bridging software, which is just an invitation to add latency to your setup, and you really don't want to do that. And sadly, I commented as such on Candle's page, and he said, yeah, sadly the guy who created the 32-bit version passed away, so he won't be doing a 64-bit version. Sad face. But I have more plugins to report on, so I'll be doing that again next week. Right, chat's kicking off. Right, this is the movie side of things. I'd just like to say a big shout out to Jess and Sean over the road, who rang the doorbell just before I was going to go live on Thursday and completely threw me out of my headspace and literally said, we've got these films, we think you ought to watch them, and handed me a fistful of DVDs. So once 5090 is over, I will be sitting down and enjoying the DVDs that Jess and Sean have lent me, none of which I have seen, so I will report back. But that was rather lovely. Yeah, other than that, exercise. I've really got to get out of this chair and start doing exercise. I went on Amazon because I got so creaky after doing 2 songs. Was it? Yeah, 2 songs yesterday. I went on Amazon and thought, right, I've got to get some form of thing to motivate me to get fit. So I found a chin-up bar that fits on the door frame for like 15 quid. So that's going to arrive some point this week, and I can start just trying to stretch me back out a bit, because I think that's where I need to work on to start with. And I also need to go out for walks. Array of Emotion says, watch out for your elbow, though. Yeah, it's still tender, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was. So I am very much limiting my guitar playing and doing stuff that involves using this. And strangely enough, it was doing the gardening that really saw it improve this week. So maybe I should do more gardening. Certainly, I have various large bushes and trees in the garden that I really need to get sorted out. Thursday, I will be back as usual. I'll probably cover any pieces of music that I write in between now and Thursday. Yeah, it will be Thursday, won't it? But before we go, I will leave you with a piece of music that I don't know if you remember last Thursday. I did one of these demonstrations using Ableton and said, I kind of like this. And it was the cello conversation. And no, I haven't bought a cello yet. It will eventually happen that I will buy a cello. Yes, I know. But for the moment, I am consoling myself with using the cellos on the BBC Symphony Orchestra Discover package. And if you remember, I played a little cello lick and thought, oh, that's got potential. And what I did yesterday is I took that little cello lick and I turned it into something that I'm really rather pleased with. And it's this, and it's still called Mournful Cellos or Celli, but what I've added, what have I added? So there's the intimate strings from Spitfire Audio, which is another one of those 29 quid jobs. There's the Surge free synthesizer that I talked about a couple of weeks ago that I absolutely love, the one with the scalable interface that is absolutely glorious. And also used the Textural Pads Lab free plugin that came out on Thursday. So I even added a little bit of guitar with me G&L S500 Strat. So this is what I ended up playing. So I hope you like this. I'm rather pleased with this one. So I was rather pleased with that one. Lots of discussion on chat about the drums on that, which are superior drummers. One of the default install kits, actually, it's in their specials category. You get a whole bunch of playing drums with brushes or soft brushes or rods, and that was just the soft brushes, and the MIDI pattern is. In fact, I don't even think I even changed it all the way through. Oh, I did for section C. I just made it slightly less comatose, but it's weird. I tried playing the track without drums and it just doesn't work. And it just gives it that little swingy vibe. And this was one of the songs, or one of the tracks, because it's an instrumental. Well, you get the idea. It's one of the things that I've done over the last month that I played back, and I kind of put it together by instinct. And that surge bass, as soon as I played it back, it was like, well, I'm going to be using that again, because it just works perfectly as building a foundation that everything else can sit on. January says, I could really hear some high choir oohs on that. That I hadn't actually thought of choir, to be honest, but there were a number of other things that I was thinking, oh, I can do this and do this. And then I just sat down and played it as it is there. And I thought, you know what? If I do anything else to this, it's not going to make it sound any better than it is. So I've just left that as it is. And that's what I put on SoundCloud, because kind of joined a music licensing group and weighing whether or not, I think I probably will actually say, hey guys, do you want to check out this piece I've just done? And yeah, I just really like that. It just makes me feel like I might actually have started to sound like I know what I'm doing, even if I don't. At least I can fake it till I make it some of the time. Whereas says about just leaving it as it is, that's the best decision oftentimes. Very much so. And it's something I really... Well, you've heard my stuff. I mean, I don't stop at the kitchen sink. I really don't. And it's like, oh, I need 9 guitar tracks and I need 3 sets of violins and 4 synth plugins. No, make that 5 or 6. Whereas I should occasionally just say to myself, okay, just stop. And January says, yeah, there's always the garage sink. I don't have a sink in the garage. Or is that being too literal? But then you go get the neighbour's kitchen sink. Yeah, very much so. But I think that's a nice place to call proceedings to a close for tonight. Thank you all very, very much for your company over the last hour and 3/4. I can't believe Thursday's show, even when I'd edited it down, was over 3 hours long. And clearly having an iced latte before the show, which I did again tonight, is the secret to being enough on the game to actually sustain momentum during the show and keep you guys chatting and interacting. And that's kind of why I'm doing this. So Mel says, thanks for streaming and thank you for being an audience. So until Thursday, on the day when 5090 starts bringing itself to a close, then I will say, wear a damn mask, but also stay well, stay safe, and stay sane in this increasingly crazy, crazy world. And as Yanowaris says, 6-pack of Guinness. Now you're talking. All right. Have a good one all.